Well, pleased to be introducing Dr. Rob Kemp again to our alumni and community. Some of you may remember Rob from our CPD event last year, and Rob did a keynote on AI and coaching back then that was really well received. So, uh, Rob is going to be running a masterclass for us on the 12th of May, and information about that can be found on our website. So, leading up to his masterclass on AI and coaching and where we are now, I thought it'd be a good idea for us to have a short dialogue around this, just as a way of helping people understand what maybe obviously covering a lot more depth and breadth in terms of the masterclass. So, thanks for your time today, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Good to be here.
And as I mean, I'd say introduce you as an executive coach, supervisor, obviously coach, trainer, writer. And I was just sharing with you earlier, your original paper that you wrote with Tatiana, I think is such a strong resource and provocative actually for coaches as well. But what else would you like to say about yourself at the start, Rob?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Damion. I love the profession and the practice of coaching. That's why I do what I do. I've been a professional coach for 20 years and organizational coach and scheme leader before that. So I've been in this field for a long time, and I guess my drive towards wanting to explore AI and think critically about AI is about making sure that technologies we introduce into the work that we do actually sit well with the core of what coaching is. So yeah, that's one of my interests. I've got a bunch of other interests around coaching, of course, but yeah, at the moment it's such a buzz topic, and I thought maybe last year would be the peak of the kind of conversation about it, but it feels like we're just really entering into a conversation as AI becomes more integrated, used, tools becoming available on platforms, etc. So what feels like it might have been a sort of conversation that's been had almost too much, it now sort of feels like a conversation that's really just starting to take off.
Mm-mm. Thanks, Rob. Thank you. And I know with the groups that train with us, but also my own practice, I know that this is a topic that keeps being discussed, with interest at the moment.
Mm.
So maybe at the start of our time, I mean, if I just invite the participants listening to this conversation to perhaps reflect and maybe share any key questions that are emerging for you in your coaching practice, or anything in particular that you're really interested in around coaching and this whole aspect of the integration of AI or not. It'd be wonderful to see those coming through in the chat panel, and then I'm sure Rob and I can pick up on some of those as we're having the conversation.
Mm.
Um, I mean, because I suppose from my perspective, Rob, there seems to be, well, as with a lot of AI, there seems to be a lot of sensationalized claims being made. Um, and I know I feel quite ethically challenged around this at times in terms of my whole um, view of coaching. Um, So just wonder perhaps if you would be happy to start with some initial reflections from your, 'cause I know you've said you're just writing another, well, about to publish another paper, but just in terms of, if we take the title AI coaching, where are we now? What would be your initial reflections?
Yeah, great. And I'm starting to become interested in in what's coming through in the panel. But
Yeah,
my
yeah.
original reflection, or my kind of initial reflections or thoughts are that we use the term AI coaching with much more flippancy than we should do. And if you like me, you follow the research on AI coaching and coaching in general, that term AI coach is used a lot in papers that will also say actually AI coaching isn't coaching, but then they'll also use the kind of naming term AI coach.
Mm.
Now, for me, that's a semantic slippage too far, and I think we need to take care of our language around what we're talking about here, because what we're really talking about is a language model that works on predictability. Okay, what we're really talking about is an automated reflective tool. It's not coaching. And when we reduce coaching simply to either a simple model like Grow, or we reduce coaching to anything, any tool or person that can ask questions, I think we have a professional problem, because there are a bunch of responsibilities and accountabilities around coaching and relational issues that a machine can't fulfill. So yeah, my initial position to that question is, we need to be careful about our language. Are we happy to call AI, reflective practice tools or questioning tools? Are we happy to call that AI coaching or not? I'm not, and I think the first paper I published with Tatiana explains why I'm not. Yeah, and I was interested, actually. I think the first question that came through, I might have to scroll back to it. Was it from Vidi? This whole idea of GDPR compliance when using an AI tool, whether that be something that takes notes or makes comments or coaches. And I noticed that the EMCC relaunched their next iteration of the GCO, the Global Code of Ethics, to which there are a number of signatories. And I read the updated portion of that. Well, I've read it all, but I was focused in on the updated portion of that, which looks at AI in coaching. And I sat back and thought, this is really interesting, because I feel what's happening here is as though individual practitioners, Vidi, me, whoever, have a very high level of responsibility regarding that code. I'm not a GDPR, I'm not an information controller, I'm not a GDPR specialist, I'm not an AI trainer, I'm not a technical kind of lead. I don't know where data goes when I use a recording tool. And it feels to me like, for example, the Global Code of Ethics puts the responsibility onto the practitioner to actually have that knowledge. And I think that's an unrealistic expectation of us as coaches. I would much rather that the professional associations, whoever they be, are doing some of that heavy lifting for coaches, rather than saying, be aware of, make sure you're aware of, make sure your clients have consented to whatever it is they're consenting to, rather than saying, well, it's your responsibility to know. And if it's difficult for you, and if you find you have questions, then take them to supervision. Well, we're supervisors as well. It doesn't change the knowledge that we have. So I find it really interesting that the Code of Ethics pushes out responsibility to individuals, rather than takes it as a professional association and says, we need to do something about this, to the GDPR point, for example. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from, Damion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I suppose it sort of resonates with some of my experience around this as well, because of that lack of guidance, we're now giving more structure in terms of what we're sharing around, for example, contracting around confidentiality and what that means. So yeah, I suppose because I can see there's a number of questions here really around perhaps where AI coaching or mentoring is being touted to organizations. And I suppose just to be, I suppose, interesting in terms of any reflections from your side, Rob, in terms of things that the organization should be questioning or paying attention to, really.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it seems there's an attractive element, isn't there, to AI coaching? It can be deployed at scale. It's not as cost and resource intensive as one-to-one coaching. It's on demand. There are lots of good reasons that organizations would want to look at AI. in the sort of people development space. And I think all those arguments are true to some extent. But the real question is, but what is the thing that has been provided at any time of day? You know, what
mm,
is the nature of the thing that they're providing? And it's not synonymous with coaching. And I think the papers that are now starting to emerge after a flurry of papers, are, you know, from Dehaan and Passmore and Van Nieuwenburg, a flurry of papers on, hey, AI, people who use this AI questioning tool or AI coach, you know, they get great goal attainment and they get great self-efficacy scores, or they get an improved self-efficacy score. That sort of narrative is now kind of tipping the balance a little bit.
mm,
We've seen a couple of papers in the last month or so that have sort of said, yeah, actually, human coaches do much better than AI in terms of what coaching actually is. But I don't think we should be kind of fooled by some of that, because the measures that are being used are still very simplistic measures, and for me, don't define the kind of totality of what coaching is.
mm,
Um, so it's good to see a bit more balance in the picture, and that the value of the human coach is being set as a premium. Um, but I don't think we should be complacent about it, because it isn't very long ago since those same authors were publishing in some way that seemed in favor, like promoting AI in this space. So I find myself, as a coach, as a practitioner, as an academic, slightly confused about the position. So
mm,
are you advocating for this to be used in organizations, or are you not? Um,
mm,
and I think I know some of the questions that we've got are around this, like, so what do the synergies look like? You know, where might we run in parallel with AI in a way that's complementary and helpful towards clients? And I think the answer is we don't really know yet. We don't really know yet. We don't really have the evidence, or even the kind of level of engagement and use that would give us even anecdotal evidence. You know, it doesn't need to be research evidence. Even anecdotal evidence, I think,
mm,
yeah, I think that's where I would land, really, which is it's still nascent. We still don't know. I'm highly attracted, by the way, to the idea of AI taking all of the stuff that I don't really want to do, right? So I'm highly attracted to that. I don't want to schedule. I don't want to write session summaries. Right? I want to coach with a human being. So if AI can take some of that stuff from me, yeah, I'm all for that. I guess the caveat is, when we relinquish some of our responsibility, and some of those things are our responsibility, when we relinquish that, what are we doing? And where are we putting that data and those people? And I find myself in a position where I can't yet form an alliance with my practice with AI, because I have too many questions and too many fears about things like confidentiality, GDPR, knowing really where this stuff is living in the world. Um, and that's
mm,
where my position is. If those questions, which I think some of them are technological questions, once some of those things are sorted out in a way that sort of fits with coaching, then I will be more likely to adopt some of those complementary tools. Will I ever in my practice recommend to an organization or an individual coach that they would use AI in the process of coaching? No, I wouldn't. Um, could I see a time when some prompting on kind of orientation and kind of things people want to achieve at the start of a relationship? Yeah, that could be helpful. Though any coach that I know and work with and have trained will have done that very quickly within a session anyway. It's a kind of question of, just because we can, should we? Like, do we need to? Does that help or hinder the relationship? And again, we've just got a lack of evidence there. Yeah, I could go on, but I won't, because we've got a lot to cover.
yeah. Yeah, no, 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 sure. And I suppose on the sides where any of the, because I know and again, this may be my misunderstanding, but I think there was a lot of the research that came out from AI coaching companies. They were sort of promoting a lot of the impact of this from, yeah, anyway. I just wonder if you've seen any, and again, I appreciate it maybe it's not robust evidence, but in terms of the type of areas where the AI coaching has been used and any of the effects of that, Rob?
Yeah, I don't have insight into any large scale implementations. I mean, I've certainly got insight into kind of coach training, coach CPD, and coach evaluation with the use of AI. So, AI tools that are there to look at the coaching conversation, so coachee, and to do some analysis on that. How do I feel about that? I don't feel fantastic about it. So these systems measure things like share of voice. They they measure what they call sentiment, critical moments. So when pace, pitch, volume increases. Some of these systems can also look at versus competencies. So they can look at ICF framework or whatever and say how well people are meeting those competencies within the example session.
Mm.
I can appreciate that if somebody has hundreds of these videos to look at and evaluate, I can appreciate where AI might be able to help shortcut some of those processes and kind of focus us down on what we should be looking at as humans in that relationship. But I'm very drawn. It is the last comment in there to Romy Bowen's point. Has anyone else noticed that Copilot, for example, does not capture the wondering and the imagining that's so vital to coaching at depth? And that's how I feel about AI looking at my practice or anyone else's practice. Anyone with a modicum of experience in coaching can tell what share of voice looks like. I don't need a machine to do that for me. But I do appreciate that when we're at scale, that might be advantageous. I do though wonder whether we're walking down the kind of rabbit warren of, well, just because we can, we are, and is it necessary? In what circumstances is it necessary? And I think, you know, when we did the CPD day last year, you know, I was very clear to make my position kind of not anti-AI. I use AI all the time for all sorts of things. I'm not anti-technology. I'm a bit of a tech geek. I like technology, but just because we can, should we? My position.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, I suppose I've seen some of the accounts that have come through with more of the therapeutic AI bots, you know, in terms of perhaps validating and I suppose being reconfirming for the therapy client rather than supporting them to really be able to make therapeutic change in a way. I mean, I'm not close enough to any of these AI coaching bots to. I've only seen some ChatGPT versions, etc. I just wondered if you've experienced any yourself, Rob, and how you found them.
Yeah, I have. And I find them without naming the ones
Hmm.
that I've looked at because some of them are made by people that we know well. What's my reaction to them? They can be on point in terms of the areas which they're prompting on because that comes from us, right? So when a machine asks us a question about what we want to think about, we tell it and we provide it with that information, and then it's fairly on point with coming back in those areas. I find them very surface level, like that's what they are. They're just structured prompts, and so the quality of like reflection really depends on my ability to be able to engage with the discussion. And I think that's where they diverge from real coaches, because actually part of our job as coaches is to help people engage in questions in ways that they haven't yet engaged in them. And so here's the critical dilemma. We put someone with a machine which has zero ability to kind of know what's really going on relationally, and there is no real relationship because it's just a question. And then we expect people to be able to engage with it in a way that is different from the way that they've thought before. I mean, that's a remarkable ask, right? Whereas what we do, I believe, as coaches, is we engage in that tussle and that difficulty and that resistance and that confusion, and we help the person turn it into something that's manageable, that stretches their thinking. And I think, at the root of that is what makes the difference between a human being and an automated kind of reflective prompt. And without getting too woo-woo about it, for me, coaching is about the stuff of the human soul. It is about, the things that we don't understand about ourselves, or the way in which we react or interact with our universe and our context. No one can do that except another human being. And actually, it's not guaranteed that another human being can do it, right? So yeah, I find the ones that I've experienced so far to be exactly what they should be advertised as, which is automated reflective prompts, or ARP, as I coin it. And I think when we start to treat the models as such, and when we start to name them as such, and when we make the clear delineation between what we consider coaching is and coaching is not, then we'll be in a much better position as a profession. I think, the analogy of it's like equating, a saw to a carpenter is a tool. Questioning to a coach is a tool. A saw isn't joinery, right? And questions aren't coaching. They're just tools. One of the tools that we have in our approach and work with people. In the same way that silence is a tool. And so I think we don't want to conflate the terms coaching and questioning, and we don't want to conflate the practice of machine prompting with what real coaching is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really resonate with what you're sharing there in terms of, the capacity we work at as a coach, and really what we're sensing and feeling is something far beyond questions that we're asking. So just because of time, so I suppose if there were some key things you would say to the group that are listening in terms of, so as an individual practitioner, what would you say are some key considerations for them in terms of whether it's technology or AI, really, Rob, in terms of us as a profession? So the questions we really need to ask ourselves and things to pay attention to.
I think as a profession and as a group, we need to go back to our first principles. We need to really pay proper attention to what is coaching, how do we define it, what are its essential constituents, without which it cannot be called coaching. So, I mean, you could use the analogy of an untrained coach or somebody who has no experience just going and having a chat with somebody and considering that to be coaching, right? We wouldn't call that coaching because it misses some essential criteria. A contract, some understanding of the process, all those things. So for me, I think it's incumbent upon us as coaches, as a profession, as professional associations, as individuals, as groups, as companies and organizations, it's incumbent upon us to just nail our colours to the mast about what we think coaching is. Now, I'm not advocating for that in the sense of, a competency framework, because I don't think that encompasses what coaching is either in its entirety. I'm talking about those essential elements that we recognise as coaching. And I would encourage every one of us to go back and just have a think about, well, so what do I think coaching is? Like, what sits at the root of our profession? And then I would ask people to evaluate it on their own against those criteria, AI against those criteria, and say where they think it can help and where they think it simply can't help. Not as a matter of technological escalation. So in other words, some of AI can be very AI can seem very kind of slick and erudite and at times, and at sometimes it can seem very clunky, can't it? And my belief is that that clunkiness and that difficulty and those misunderstandings in time they will disappear. They'll certainly minimize. I'm not talking about that argument, the technology, like we're not there with the technology yet. I'm talking about the argument that says, what do we believe coaching is? And when I say believe, I'm not just talking about, well, I think it's X, so it's X. I'm like, let's look at what the kind of theory of coaching says. Let's look at what the research says about coaching being relational, for example. Let's look at what the current sort of discourse is. Let me interact with other coaches and see what they think coaching is. And by that, and put that together with the professional association's view and organization's view and go, okay, we have a fairly clear, maybe not crisp definition, but we're fairly clear on the foundational elements. That's our starting point. Right? Everything else comes from that. And when you do that, it becomes very quickly clear that AI tools of whatever nature, whether that be around the business of coaching and the sort of admin around coaching, whether it be in terms of note taking, whether it be in terms of prompted questions, whether it be in terms of measuring coaching and kind of entry into the realms of evaluation, you can see that there potentially could be a role there for AI, and it could be very helpful. But that doesn't come without all the caveats that we've talked about already. The first one being, data confidentiality, GDPR. I saw in the thread there was the terrible case of the therapist notes being leaked on the internet. There are, we could talk about a litany of difficulties with confidentiality in AI. We could talk about a number of examples of AI demonstrating unprogrammed behavior, having what's termed as hallucinations. There's lots of problems, both ideologically and technologically. Eventually, the technological problems will reduce. Ideologically, the bar will have already been set. So yeah, that's my sort of position.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike asked a good question about it's agree that clear communication on what is important in coaching, but also do we need communication on what AI cannot do and how it is inferior? Yeah, I think we do. I think we need a lot more research. I'm not necessarily talking about high-level academic research. I'm talking about practitioner stories. I'm talking about lived experience stories. It doesn't need to be highfalutin. I just don't think we've got enough experience yet to bring out all those areas, Mike, in which AI is inferior. I mean, for me, the very obvious one is AI is not embodied, right? AI is most certainly at the moment inferior to human beings about reading what's going on, about being in either a physical or a virtual space with somebody. AI can only replicate what has been there already. And so a large language model works on predictability, right? Actually, my coaching practice is based on being unpredictable at times, about doing the thing that definitely isn't expected or seems inappropriate, right? Or doesn't follow the thread of a conversation or offers something quizzical. Human beings will always be better at doing that than machines, for sure. So yeah, I think there's a whole list of things that machines will never be able to do as well as human beings, but they can also think an awful lot quicker than we can sometimes. They can produce large volumes of information quickly. Whether it's all correct or not is another question. And I think that's probably one of the other interesting points in terms of coaching is, are these machines holding a coaching approach of not knowing and inquisitiveness and not offering advice? And I think we need a lot more research on that piece, because I'm not going to be taking advice from a machine anytime soon. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Um, so the group listening, just to say again, so Rob's session is going to be on 12th of May at 1 o'clock. It'll be an hour session. So we'll be really going into this topic in a lot more detail. So that may
Mm.
be of interest. The information is on our website. Rob, anything you want to say just to close the conversation down from your side?
No, but lovely to see the comment. Very helpful and reassuring. Yeah, I think we are all in the same boat. Okay, and so part of what we're doing is hopefully pulling apart some of those threads of understanding and position that we can all contribute to. And so just by being here or just by coming to the masterclass, you are part of that developing conversation, and your voice is as important as mine. So yeah, come along.
Yeah, really important practitioners have a voice because otherwise it's all um, one-sided, I would say.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate your time and your reflections and you sharing of your experience as well.